August 16th. It's only our first Uposatha of the Vasa, very late Vasa. And the Yosemite trip will be taking place more in the middle of the Vasa rather than near the end. So there's all sorts of stuff in the pipeline, and so different travels. But then October is pretty much, like I should be here pretty much all of October, and all of October is still within this Vasa. So we do still have a lot of time in the Vasa, and just thank you to Xander for his service and working in the office and doing a very good job. And I can see that you have benefited from your time here and actually grown quite a bit. So that's really what we're here for, is to help people to grow and have less suffering. And the anagarika training is a hard training, so it is ordinary for people to leave, but also to know that there's no hard feelings, and that I'm personally glad that I've seen you, having met you a while ago. I've seen you grow quite a bit, so I'm quite happy about that. So anumodana for your time spent here. And for the rest of us, something I've been reflecting on is this, that samana, one of the definitions of a samana is one who does what needs to be done. So it's very much our practice here, and been thinking about Metika quite a bit lately, just because of being at Three Jewels, spending time there and really appreciating that place. And then when I was in the Seattle area just recently, was looking through some old photos, and from our photo collection, our archive. Actually, I was looking for this 2004 trip where Longpa Liam, Longpa Jundi, Ajahn Nyaniko, Ajahn Utain, they all stayed at Ladawan's house during that trip. So I was actually looking for those photos, but I inadvertently found a very old photo of Metika giving offerings to Longpa Liam at Three Jewels, and a lot of joy came up seeing that. And she used to always talk about that a samana, in her mind, she defines samana as one who does what needs to be done. And so that's very much our practice here, and it's really important to reflect on that we actually do, in the monastery, we do what needs to be done, not what we like to do, not what our preferences are, but just what needs to be done. I like to use the example of like when I became the water monk early on. Actually, when I was in Anagarika, I became the water monk, but I didn't have an aspiration to learn how to fix water pipes. That wasn't like a personal hobby or a personal aspiration that I had, but it definitely was something that needed to be done. So I could take that teaching and say, okay, well, this is a practice of going against my preferences, and then when the water pipe breaks in the afternoon and I don't want to work, I want to go rest, but the water pipe breaks and we're going to run out of water. Or the well, we used to have this well at the Dhamma hall at the ordination platform area, and it could pump 600 gallons per day. And so I just remember being involved with that, and it would run dry, like all the water would run out, and if you ran it too dry, it could cave in. So we devised this method of putting just enough gas in the generator to run. There was no electricity up there. Just enough gas in our generator to run the well pump, just enough so that the generator would run out of gas before the well ran dry, and then doing that every day, and just remembering things like that, and just part of the history of Abhayagiri, having to just do all sorts of things. It was not nearly as convenient here back in those days. Now we have a paved road all the way up, and it's, even though we just did that last year, it's hard to remember the dirt road. It's hard to remember what it was like and how dusty it was all the time, and how we're having to wash the DV on a daily basis just to make it, just be able to get into it without coughing. Just so much dust. And things are so much more convenient now. So, but it's easy to, sometimes it's easy to see what we don't have, but it's hard to see what we have. So one way we keep the mind positive is actually try to focus on what we have, and what we actually, the conveniences that we have. it's easy to forget what we didn't have before. So before, say we didn't have a paved road, so all this dust, we need to pave this road at some point. But then we paved the road, and then rather than the mind saying, oh, we have a paved road, wow, amazing, magnificent, wonderful, the mind goes to the next thing that we don't have. And that's what the mind does. So, but then there's some slight negativity in that. So how can we actually steer the mind to focus more on what we have? We have the training, we have the precepts. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 8 Patimokkha chanters sitting here in our midst. 8 out of 14, I believe, here can chant the Patimokkha. Now that Venerable Rakito has accomplished the Patimokkha, and that's a huge sadhu to Tan Rakito for that, chanting a very good Patimokkha, very good first Patimokkha, and based on your age, that's extremely praiseworthy to learn the Patimokkha, and that's going to be a foundation for the rest of your life. So that's something we have. We have that. Or the mind could get negative and say, well, we don't have 6 Patimokkha chanters here, but rather that would be kind of like, oh, we don't have 6 Patimokkha chanters, or we could say we have 8 Patimokkha chanters. So it's a subtle difference, but the Buddha would make these subtle distinctions sometimes. In one sutta, the Buddha says, sometimes I teach in an unpleasant way, and sometimes I teach in a pleasant way. How do I teach in an unpleasant way? When I say, don't do this, don't do that, I teach in an unpleasant way. When I say, do this, do that, I teach in a pleasant way. When I say, develop this, develop that, I teach in a pleasant way. When I say, refrain from this, refrain from that, I teach in an unpleasant way. And the Buddha saw that sometimes there needs to be those 2 different ways of being. They could be helpful at different times. But anyway, going against our preferences, that's a huge part of our practice. You hear how many times the Kruba Ajahns in Thailand, I've heard it so many times, and I've heard it enough times to think, wow, that must be at least a little bit important to, when you're in the food line, sometimes going against your preferences, sometimes not taking the foods that you necessarily want or think that you need, going against the preferences, going against our desires, going against our views. And this is a huge part of the training. And it doesn't mean we need to torture ourselves, but we do put pressure on our assumptions and our ways we think things should be. Or if something needs to be done, a certain duty needs to be done, or somebody is overworked in the community, being able to lend a hand, even though it may not be something that we want to do, or something that we would choose to do by our own volition, but seeing that, somebody needs some help. Somebody needs help carrying something. Somebody needs some help. And it's not something I would necessarily want to do or choose to do, but it's what needs to be done. So the heart of the samana is the heart that says, I'm just going to do what needs to be done, what's necessary in the moment. So then when we have that attitude, first we have that attitude externally, so that's dana, and then when we bring that attitude internally, it's called chaga, or relinquishment. Dana is giving, chaga is giving up. So when we learn how to give externally, we learn how to give a helping hand, we learn how to be generous. Then when we bring it internally, we learn how to give up. We learn how to give up our views and opinions. We learn how to give up our preferences, or at least call them into question. And that's liberating. That's very liberating. That's the path to less suffering and more happiness. It's a bit counterintuitive. We think that the path to happiness is, at first we think the path to happiness is following our preferences, getting what we want. But that's just the path to more suffering. So we learn these subtle truths through the Buddha's teachings. I just finished reading this book, The Chitter Story, George Sharp. Really wonderful book, highly recommended. And it's really quite inspiring because he was such a seminal figure, such a pivotal figure in our Sangha, working with Lumpur Sumedho and actually going to Thailand and personally working with Ajahn Paniwado, Lumpur Paniwado, and Dhammahabua, Luang Por Chah, personally working with all of them to try to get the Sangha transplanted into the West. And he talks about coming to the practice. Early on in the book, he talks about how he started practicing and how he got involved with the English Sangha Trust. And he was really depressed, and he didn't really have that much. He had a career, but he was very unhappy. He didn't have much direction. And then when he actually started going to Dhamma talks by Kapila Watu. His name was Kapila Watu. Kapila Watu, who was a monk before and had disrobed, but who was giving teachings and offering teachings and meditation retreats. And George Sharp relating that once he started meditating, and once he had this shift where he just decided he was going to devote his life to the teachings, he says, and then I was never depressed again for the rest of my life. I thought that's a very powerful statement, that once he really got hooked by the Dhamma, he never was depressed again. And it's not that everything was easy. Certainly he took on huge challenges and things weren't easy, and he had disappointments and challenges, things that didn't work out the way he hoped they would, but he didn't get depressed. His life changed and never changed back again once he came into contact with the Dhamma. And I think he also talks about his wife leaving him, but he talks about it kind of in passing, like, well, she was kind of confused by what I was doing, and then she moved into the other house. And that's all he says about that. I don't know if she actually left him, but it's like she moved out. And I was just like, whatever. I don't know what I'm getting pulled by, but I have to keep moving in this direction because it's just intuitive at that point. But very inspiring. And so whether we're monastics or lay people, whatever level we're at, we can actually reflect on that heart of the samana, the heart that actually just does what needs to be done. Like George Sharp saying, we need the sasana in the West. This is what needs to be done. I'm going to go to Thailand. I'm going to go to Thailand with my daughter even. His daughter was Christian, and she wouldn't bow. He was frustrated that she wouldn't bow, even though she went to the monasteries and they were staying at Wat Pah Pong, and she wouldn't bow to Ajahn Chah, and George Sharp got frustrated by this. And he went to Ajahn Chah and apologized. He went to Ajahn Chah and said, sorry, my daughter won't bow to you. I'm sorry, this is so inappropriate. I'm so embarrassed. And Ajahn Chah said, you would not believe how many stupid people I meet every day. But your daughter, she's smart, and she helps me hone my wisdom. You wouldn't believe how many stupid people I meet each day. It's like, your daughter, I like your daughter, even though she doesn't bow. And then George Sharp was super impressed by that. Just that Luang Por Chah was like, no, she's really smart. She's got a good head on her shoulders. He didn't judge her for not bowing. And then when Luang Por Chah was leaving and everybody was taking leave of him, they were taking leave of Luang Por Chah, and Luang Por Chah had a bushel of white roses prepared, and he gave them to George Sharp's daughter. And she said, she was really flabbergasted, and she said, oh, he's so amazing, can I kiss him? and then she bowed to him, and Ajahn Chah was kind of like gleam in his eyes looking over at George Sharp. He was like, see, I got her. So just doing what needs to be done. It's a good reflection, and something that keeps us with the Dhamma. Because certainly, the mind is always saying that going with our preferences, going with our desires is what's going to make us happy. But the Dhamma is saying, no, actually calling that into question and just doing what needs to be done is what's going to give us that deep inner happiness, where we can have that inward smile where we say, yeah, that was difficult, but I did it, and it needed to be done. So leave that for reflection.